episode in March, Around the World with the BBC World Service. Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Namulanta Kombo and Kim Chakanetsa, both from BBC World Service podcast. We are so excited to talk to them today. I'm going to read our brief intro and then we will get into it. So, hello and welcome. And here we go. So, welcome back, everyone, to Storytelling Podcast Week and our March Roundtable, Around the World with the BBC World Service, with special guests Namulanta Kombo of Dear Daughter and Kim Chakanetsa of The Comb. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Storytelling Podcast Week has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and storytellers from scripted fiction and nonfiction podcasters from across our world and our imaginations. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Storytelling Podcast Week podcast, so make sure to check those out. Storytelling Podcast Week is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 600,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And now we'll jump in and begin. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We are so excited that you're both here with us today. And well, yeah, it's just so exciting. And, I think we're pretty global here today. So we've got Kim in the UK, I think.
Yes, correct.
And Namulanta, you're coming to us from Kenya, I believe.
Yeah, Nairobi.
Very exciting. So let's just jump in and get started. For those who may not be familiar yet, tell us about yourselves and the shows you've created. And let's start with you first.
Sure. So my name is Kim Chakanetsa. I am a Zimbabwean journalist based in London, and I present The Comb, which is a BBC World Service podcast. Now, The Comb, like the name says, is really all about combing the continent for stories that are surprising, fascinating, and relevant, and stories that sort of center African voices and African narratives. And we cover a huge range of stories. In the past, we started in June 2020. Since we started, we've done everything from the pressure to get married, to crypto scams, to looking at what draws women into gangs. So a really wide breadth of stories. But the through line of all our stories is that we are very keen on strong personal narratives. And yeah, so I personally, in terms of my own personal narrative, I joined the BBC in September 2013, and I was delighted to join because I've always wanted to join the BBC. I grew up listening to the BBC and I loved radio. So for me, it was always all about radio. So it's a real pleasure for me to be doing what I do.
Fantastic. Namulanta, let's hear a bit about your story.
Well, my name is Namulanta Kombo and I live and work in Nairobi. I was born and bred here. Last year, I entered a competition with the BBC. It was the International Podcast Competition, and it sought for people to send in their submissions for a competition for a non-broadcaster who would like to tell their story through podcasting. And the theme was anything relating to women, strongly relating to women. And I submitted and I won. And it's been 6 months of this amazing journey because I have no broadcasting experience. I have never been on the radio. I have never presented anything, but I had a story to tell and I won the competition and we've been doing it for 6 months now.
Incredible.
I have to just jump in and say, Namulanta is such, like, you're a natural broadcaster.
Thank you.
Truly. It's been such a pleasure. I'm just listening to you. So yeah, some people, I guess, just have it, and you do. So.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I'm enjoying it. I mean, I am enjoying it and learning along the way. So it didn't start off that way, but that's a story that I'll continue to tell a bit later.
Yeah, I think that's what's great about podcasting. I think that it really enables so many natural storytellers to be able to share their communities and stories and the narratives that are important within those communities. So Namulanta, as someone who's newer to podcasting, and Kim also as a seasoned broadcaster, what were the inspirations for your shows? How did you come up with the concept and the idea for Dear Daughter and The Comb? Namulanta, let's start with you on this one.
Okay, so I had the idea to it wasn't for a podcast. Initially, I became a mother for the first time 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And I realized suddenly, I'm not being viewed as myself anymore. I'm so and so's mom, especially where I live and where I've been brought up. It's an honor to be a parent, to be a mother, and you're now called Mama so and so or Ma so and so, so mother of.
Yeah.
And I just realized I still feel like me. I still have so many things, experiences that have happened to me, and I have so much to say, but I don't want my daughter to just see me as her mom and not this person who's a treasure trove, if I must say, of advice and things to say, whether they're she wants to hear them or not. So I had the idea to write down all these anecdotes and things that I would like to share with her, and give them to her when she gets older, so that if she felt at any point that she couldn't ask me or didn't want to ask me or didn't think that I would have an answer to something, it might be in that book. I thought it would be a book. Um, so that's how it began. And I started writing all these things down. And as I spoke to friends and family, I realized that, well, everyone has something to say. Everyone has something that could be in this book that would be of value to her. So that's where it began. And I started collecting all these stories. And some people would write beautifully. Some people would send me a voice note. Some people would send me a video. And I just started collecting all these stories. And they were coming from men and women, but people that she knew. And that's where the idea began. And when I had the call for the competition, when I found out about it, it took me a minute. I thought, I hadn't thought about a podcast, but I thought, it could work, because I wanted this to be something very introspective and retrospective. And I realized another if word is collective. If we could just share all these stories. And the beauty of podcasting is that you can sit alone with it and really think about how it can impact you. And you can take away from it as much as you want to. You could stop if you wanted to. You can move around with it. So I thought, okay, this would be a great opportunity. And I submitted my idea, and here we are.
Amazing.
In terms of the comb, it was born out of a wider desire by the BBC to reach a different audience. And all the research that's been done suggests that we tend to skew male. And we really wanted a way to incorporate the female audience, not just the female audience, but younger audience overall. So the comb itself was born out of just us. I say us, it's Mary and me. It's Mary Goodhart is my main producer. So once we were given the green light to kind of try things out, we knew one thing for sure. We wanted to use BBC Africa's really wide and impressive network of journalists to power the journalism. We wanted to really use our newsroom and lean into that strength. And so something that we do now, we use a lot of our journalists to bring us stories. And essentially, in terms of how the comb came to being, it was really kind of trial and error, really. We were sort of trying different things in terms of like, what are the stories that are under the radar, the stories that, are kind of newsroom adjacent that might not get time on the radio, and how can we kind of tell these stories in a creative way, in an engaging way. So we played around, and we were really lucky. We had like 3 months of just sort of trialing and doing different things, and then we sort of came up with the thing which we felt worked. And over time we sort of refined that, but that's how we sort of came about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have quite a lot of experience and quite a big background in terms of traditional journalism. So it's definitely something where like looking at the projects you've done previously, like how was the inspiration for the comb, I guess, like did it come from any of that, or in terms of
I guess
like how
so.
did your prior experience play into creating that show, because it's such a beautiful show and it really speaks to so many different aspects of culture and life on the African continent?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very, very good question, because what happens often is when you're in the newsroom. So I work on the news desk. I was on the news desk prior to moving onto the comb. And on the news desk, they are, there's something about breaking news, and, it's really important and it's urgent, and this, but sometimes there's not as much room for long form storytelling. right? So you'll hear about, this story, this thing happened here, and you'll get sort of just the kind of the bones of it, of what happened. What the comb has allowed us to do is to kind of flesh that out and to, give people time to sort of understand the full story. I'll give you an example of one of the journalists that we've been working with is our BBC Women's Affairs correspondent in Nairobi, Esther Akelo Ogola. And there'd been a story she'd been working on about abortion. And she'd been really struggling because in terms of, it's one that people tend to shy away from.
Yeah.
And the way she wanted to tell it was going, not impossible, but was going to be difficult on radio. And the podcast format, that's the joy of the podcast format. It gives you so much more freedom. And so we were able to tell that story in a way that she was very happy with, and that kind of did her story justice. So I guess that's for me where the sort of the newsroom and the podcast kind of intersect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And I want to kind of take that question and redirect it to you, Namulanta, because you won a contest with the BBC. So, Namulanta, tell us a little bit about what the process was like for you entering the BBC contest and going to the next round and meeting for producers, because so many podcasters, who come from maybe an unexperienced or amateur background. That's the dream, right? You win a contest and then you work with the BBC World Service. So tell us a little bit about what that process was like for you.
Yeah. Before this, I would always go about life saying, I never win anything. And then I do win something, and it's big. It's something really big. And I didn't tell anyone that I was I was entering the competition. I found out about it through a friend. And my friend is the only person who I spoke about it a bit in the beginning, but I didn't tell anyone. So I think I was shocked. I was very surprised. But in terms of, let me start from the beginning. In terms of entering the competition, I feel like the BBC made it very simple for somebody like me who doesn't have any experience to enter the competition, to feel confident to enter the competition. It didn't ask for my grandmother's blood group or anything, anything complicated like that. They really just wanted to know, obviously, who I am, and they wanted to know what my idea was. That's all they wanted to know. And they wanted us to present our ideas in the best way, in the best light possible. So for me, I always say that the competition application for me inspired me to actually enter, because it was really simple. It was daunting for me to think, okay, I'm going to enter a competition with the BBC. But once I looked at what the application was like, it really was just asking me a very simple question, like, what do you want to say? And why do you want to say it? And because the idea was so close to my heart, I found it very simple to say what I wanted to do, what I wanted to say, and who I wanted to hear about it. So I got through that part, and then I'm very laid back.
Was it an essay, or did you make a sample episode, or was it?
So sorry, yeah. So what I did was it was a description of what the podcast idea was, and then I added a little voiceover. I read a letter. I read the first letter a friend of mine had ever sent in to me. The ones I've been collecting. So I read that.
Yeah.
And I hear later on that really took it away from me. But I remember I'm quite a laid back person, but I literally emailed the BBC like 3 weeks later, like, what's happening? I thought this is the BBC and I'd get a response sooner than this, And they told me very politely, just wait. We'll let you know as soon as, there's anything to say. And I can't remember how long, but sometime later, I think a month later or so, I got a call saying that an email saying that I'm down to the final 10. And then I thought, you've done a really good job. Well done, because I never thought from there I would get any further than that. And I thought, this is that was good. That was really well done. And then I had a little interview with the guys in London, with the producers in London. And I then was told that I'd won, which was again probably another maybe a month later,
Mhm.
I got the call saying I'd won, and I was just quiet. And he's like, "Are you there?" And he thought there was a problem with the connection, but I was just stunned into silence. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it went down.
I have
Wow.
I have to say I was one of the judges, like not the not the last batch. So I was sort of in the middle when once they'd whittled them down to
Mm.
about I think about 60, and I definitely read your entry Namulanta, and it really stood out. It was just such a wonderful, wonderful sort of concept. So yeah, I was
Thank you.
very pleased for you
Thank
when
you.
you got
Thank you very much. So what I've heard is that it was what was attractive, like Kim, you're a judge, but that it was a
it.
simple idea.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I've come to hear a lot more that those are some of the best ideas, especially when it comes to podcasting.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Anyone can, you don't have to, anywhere in the world, you sort of understand the concept immediately. And it's, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It appeals to
yeah,
everyone. I thought, yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I think it's something where as podcasters, because at Podbean we host like 600,000 podcasts. So
Mm,
as
mm,
podcasters, so many, we all have these convoluted ideas and want to
mm,
produce these, podcasts with so many different elements and
mhm.
concepts. And sometimes it's the simplest things that
Absolutely.
really, yeah, have that emotional reach
Mhm,
that do so well and resonate with the most amount of people. So
mhm.
yeah,
it's really incredible. And from there, I'm just really curious. So once they're like, "Hey, you won," and you're like, "Oh, I'm shocked," and then no,
yeah.
I'm here. What's that process like? Never having had a traditional media background, what's it like coming in and starting to work with the BBC? Like,
Yeah.
do you have production meetings, and are you talking about sound design? Like, what does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. So it was terrifying because now I was like, oh my gosh, okay, what does this actually mean now? And it meant, first of all, I have a full-time job. So it meant me working out um how I was gonna balance the two.
Yeah.
And then once we settled down everything in terms of figuring out the timings and who's on board and all that. So what happens is I go in twice a week to the local office in Nairobi, and it's production meetings. We have letters that we have to sift through from all over the world. Can you believe
Yeah.
it? People writing in from places, to be honest, I'd never even heard of, and they're writing these letters, and they want to be a part of the podcast. So it's
Wow.
sifting through letters and seeing who we would like to interview further and whose story we would like to delve a bit more into. It's then figuring out the technicalities and me learning sound engineering and all these things,
Yeah.
how a studio works,
Mm,
and then it was me being comfortable enough to talk to somebody I'd never met about stuff that was really personal to them. Um, and I needed to learn a bit more about how to, tact and interviewing, how to interview, how to listen,
mhm.
and all these little bits that make the podcast what it is now. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
I love that you say how to listen because it is something that is just a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, it's
It's
not
harder than
natural.
it
Yeah,
seems.
yeah,
Yeah, and you just
yeah,
have to really, and it's still an ongoing thing for me, just learning how
yeah,
to listen and kind of because that's where the magic happens when you're kind of really listening to someone and you're hearing what
yeah,
they're saying and you're willing to take, go off script and follow them wherever they're going,
yeah,
and that's,
yeah,
it does take time.
yeah. And it's a very different reaction as well when someone does feel heard. Yeah, the
Yes. Oh,
interview
for sure.
takes a
For
life of
sure.
its own. Yeah, yeah,
Mm, mm,
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, and it's something where when you get so excited and somebody's, talking about something naturally, I think a lot of people want to jump in or say, I totally feel the same way,
mhm,
or,
mhm,
get involved
mhm,
in that
mm,
person's shared experience, or the experience they're sharing.
mm,
And Kim, you're totally right, because the magic happens when we just hold back that little second longer, and then,
mm.
you get something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, it's about not being afraid of silence,
Yeah.
and also knowing when not to speak. Do you know what I mean? And when to nudge, when to come in and probe a little bit more, or when to just let it go. It's a real kind of tango
Yeah,
of just kind of understanding, how the choreography of the kind of the interview, and it takes
yeah,
time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of rolls into what my next question is in terms of insight for podcasters out there who want to tell stories from communities and cultures that they're from or that they are interested in and want to, share that with a wider audience. Apart from listening, which I think is so important, what are some other maybe insight or skills that you both commonly use within your podcast to do that?
Yeah.
Kim, let's go with you on this one.
Sure. I think I try to read as widely as possible. I think that's really important, to just try, read as much as you can. And then once beyond that, I think maintaining contact. So if I'm telling a story that's from a community or a culture that's not my own, then I really have to go as prepared, and I really have to have as many conversations as I can from people from there, right? To sort of get as much guidance. And then I think those conversations are really, really important, because often what happens is sometimes I might have an idea of a story, like, oh, I found this really interesting thing. I speak to someone who's from there, or and they will kind of be like, no, that's not really the story. And often that what happens is that the best stories for us have come when we've approached someone or they've approached us, and we've kind of talked about the story, and we've found actually when we've gone down the rabbit hole that there's something else completely different happening that's much more interesting. Do you know what I mean? And that's the story. So it's just being prepared to put in the work in terms of like researching and not coming in with preconceived ideas of this is what this is and this is what I want. Being, again, similar to the listening, being prepared to be led a little bit, in terms of direction. And also when, if you're telling something from your own community, it's also about trying to find a fresh angle, because I think, as a Zimbabwean, I know there's a lot of stories that are, when people cover Zimbabwe, there's sort of certain stories people tend to gravitate towards. So it's trying to find, like, what are some of the untold stories? What have we not heard about? Where can we go that's interesting? So I guess in a nutshell, for me, it's really about that research before you even start interviewing, doing the research, speaking to people as widely as possible, being open to possibilities of going in a different direction, and just kind of questioning yourself in terms of like, what is my interest in the story, just kind of just working out your approach before you get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Namulanta?
I agree with everything that Kim has said, and she took the words out of my mouth. But the only other thing that I would add, which for me, as an amateur, someone who'd never been in production and development of a program of any sort, it must have been very annoying for my producers. But I found that before an interview, I would just talk about everything and nothing with the person that I was interviewing, just to create some sort of rapport, because for them it was the first time that they were doing this. For me, it's the first time, and it was how I felt comfortable, just having those extra 7 minutes, 10 minutes to just talk about the weather, or talk about the cost of fish wherever you are, or whatever it was. And I just found that continuing to do that, that's what was working for me. Just having this feeling that I know someone better, and I found that for them, they were a bit more open and a bit more willing to talk, because we'd had this random chat before going on air. It took a lot of time sometimes, and it was annoying for the production team. But I just found that it was working. And I also, there was a turning point for me where I just thought, sometimes I don't know. I don't have anything to say, because I don't have any advice, and we're just chatting. And I found that was also created a feeling that we were just having a chat, me being honest and saying, I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I'd react to this situation, and not feeling too much like a journalist. No offense to the journalists listening, but just feeling like I'm just anyone you could be talking to in a cafe or something. Yeah.
Oh, I completely agree about how important that when you start. And I've often found, once I say, oh, we're recording, once I let people know, there's a kind of slight stiffening up of the, okay, now it's time for me to put on my broadcasting voice, and so if you are able to sort of soften that, just by chatting with them and just easing them into it, it does make such a big difference. I completely agree, Namulanta.
Yeah, absolutely. I think creating a sense of familiarity and even safety with people that we speak with is so important, because
Yeah.
that's where, they're going to be able to unwind and tell us their stories, or their experiences.
And
Yeah.
that's also tied to how you do the interview, because often if I know that I'm going to a difficult interview, making sure you have time. I know that sounds silly, but so you can pause, and so I can say, if at any time you want to stop, and and you're not sort of looking at the clock like, oh, we need to get to this section. The person can stop, the person can pause, and because sometimes I do really difficult interviews, and I think you owe the contributor that space to allow them
Yeah.
to take their time and not be rushed because you've booked the studio for half an hour
Yeah.
to get going.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also really valuable insight. I think when you're interviewing people, not to rush things in so many ways, right? Not to interrupt and get just too excited, and to really hone in on listening, and to also give space, that kind of non-defined, front end, tail end, real kind of space to be human, I guess, and create that safety and connection with people that you're inviting on your show, or people whose stories you're telling. So that's so amazing from both of you. That's
Yeah.
really valuable insight. As African women, you both highlight stories about women within both the African diaspora and the globe. In the case of Dear Daughter, what are some similarities that you've encountered within those stories? Namulanta, let's go with you first on this one.
So the similarities that I've encountered as in hearing these stories,
Yeah,
regardless of where they're
and
from. Okay.
right.
Yeah. So I realized that everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah.
I'll find that I'm speaking to someone in Russia or w- in Canada, and it feels like something that would have happened to me here. In terms of how we feel about things, or how we react to things, or the things that we're trying to figure out. Um, and I found that the world is a lot smaller than I actually thought. Being human it doesn't matter where you're from. We're all struggling with pretty much the same things. So for me, that was really heartening for me to realize that my daughter, who I started this idea for, can learn from so many women across the world. And there have been men on the podcast as well. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the fact that it doesn't, time doesn't seem to matter, race doesn't seem to matter, economic status doesn't seem to matter. How you feel is how you feel. And um, that's a fantastic lesson that I will be able to teach my daughter from this journey that I'm on, to know that time and space, it doesn't seem to matter. We're all learning and we're all human. And with the empathy that I hope she'll be able to live anywhere and amongst anyone. So I just found that the stories are very similar. The setting is different, but the human experience and the human journey is very much the same. And made me feel a lot closer to you in Bali and you in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kim, do you find similarities between the
Yeah, I
stories that
think
you
so.
tell?
I think Namulanta put it beautifully. I think about the human journey is very, very, very similar. I mean, obviously there are some sort of will be Africa specific things that will
Yeah.
that will come
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
in terms of the stories. But overall, the sort of overarching finding for me is that we are, whether somebody's in Pakistan, you have people. You put out an episode and someone will write for you from, I don't know, Vancouver in Canada, and say, oh, this is very similar for me, and it's just yeah, I find it very kind of heartening that we all living these very sort of complex and nuanced lives, and
Yeah.
and I can't say like there's been any kind of major things that have surprised me and I've been like, oh, we're very different. I think we are very, very much the same. We're just kind of living in different places geographically.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, that human experience
Mm,
that
mm,
seems to be just so universal.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you both want audiences to take away from your work?
Ooh.
Kim?
I guess, that's a very good question. What do I want people to take away from the work? I guess it's that, really, like, very tied closely to what that the question you just asked us, that we all kind of, I sometimes feel, and I think we're shifting away from that sort of African experience was flattened, that we were kind of, there was always one story told. And I think, there's a lot been written about that, the sort of one single African story.
Yeah.
And I feel that what hopefully we are contributing is just adding just a little bit more nuance to that conversation and just reflecting the kind of multiple textures that go with, like, being African. And and that there's sort of multitude of voices, and people have different feelings and thoughts about different things, and they live like different lives from different places. And I know that sounds a little bit contradictory, but I'm just trying to say we're trying to reflect, like, just to showcase multiple voices. And I think that's where we want people to come away from the comb kind of having felt that they are getting a little bit of insight into a world that's kind of multicolored and multi-textured.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think with Dear Daughter, I'd like people to realize that we're all a bit like onions, and we have layers and layers, and sometimes we will I mean, without peeling back the layers, or with the willingness to sort of see what somebody is all about and try and understand them, it makes it very difficult to empathize. And for me, my big word is empathy. I just think that if we could empathize, or just try to empathize, and just try and try to understand where someone may be coming from, it will make it a lot easier to figure out why they are who they are. And I think there is a benefit in just taking interest. And for me, what Dear Daughter has done is created for that opportunity for me to learn so much about people from all over the world, which is amazing. But it's also allowed me to think about who I am and what I would like to do, and learn from other people. I mean, our culture, African culture, is storytelling, which has always been an oral, passing on orally. And I feel like this is just part of my culture, and I'm just broadening it up to the world. And I'm learning. It's helping me work on myself. So I hope that anyone who's listening to the podcast could have a bit of more empathy about people, but also think about how they can work on themselves and their own personal journeys, and also share stories. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as you're both talking about, the audience's experience, it's something where there are a lot of preconceived notions, right? I mean, I think with Dear Daughter being a woman, there's a lot of preconceived notions, right? Of being a woman in the world. And Kim, especially hearing you speak about, like, the one common story that's told out of Africa, there are a lot of preconceived notions and assumptions, I think, that people make about maybe the population, from Africa being around the world, as podcasting is, and the experience of being a woman, and what we want to tell our daughters. So what experiences do you feel are new and less commonly covered that you're excited about telling? Namulanta?
That makes okay.
You're on the spot.
I was just thinking about the episodes that we've done. We recently did one on stillborn birth, and loss of babies, which for me, where I'm from, and now in speaking to the lady who it's out now. So the lady's in Ireland. She lives in Ireland. It's the same thing there. It's not something that's spoken about, which is the same here. It's something that is kept very secretive. It's, of course, it's a devastating loss, and not everyone wants to talk about it. But she was explaining to me that, the pussyfooting around the topic sometimes makes it even worse, and people not acknowledging, that your child was there, or the grief that you're going through for her, makes it a lot worse. And she also spoke about the shame in not being womanly enough. Some of the things we spoke off what was edited, but the shame of not being womanly enough to carry a child, that type of shame, which is a huge stigma. Not being able to have a child, not being able to carry a child is a huge stigma. So I really loved that conversation, and I hope it will open a lot more discussion about it's a loss. It's a loss to any woman not to take your child home. And it's a loss to many women, not all, to not be able to have children. So it's something that should be supported and not vilified. So for me, that's a topic that was very close to home, and I hope it leads to more discussion.
Powerful.
Yeah. I guess for me, one of the topics that we've been discussing with Mary Goodhart, my producer, for a long time is sex. And we think about sex often framed through the lens of like sexual violence, or, so there's a lot about, abuse, and often you're talking about female genital mutilation. But we're very keen to talk about pleasure, talk about sex through the lens of pleasure, and and so that's something that we've been working on, and hopefully we'll be looking into doing a kind of an episode or a series. We're just still working on that, looking at focusing on kind of female pleasure and the conversation around that and how that's opening up a bit more, because I still think that the dominant narratives tend to be the slightly uglier conversation around sex, and we'd like to, kind of shine a light on
that.
Yeah, on that.
Kim, can I just say, I think the podcast is out today, and I was talking to my friend about that and how we're going to introduce sex to our young children, the topic of sex and it being for pleasure and not being something that should be a woman should be shamed about, and it is not for a man's pleasure. And it's so interesting that you should say that, because my friend is well read on African culture and sex, so it's definitely an episode that you should listen to.
On it. Thank you for that, Rick. On it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's something where I think when we have these preconceived notions and ideas of what a population or a place is like, we forget the entire spectrum of the human experience that exists for all of us. So I think it's so amazing that both of you are incorporating that into the work that you do. It's so important and powerful, because when we pigeonhole, or when we repeatedly tell the same narrative about a population of people or a geographical place, it really limits our ability to understand and to connect, I think. Absolutely. In so many ways, just across the board. So I'm so glad that you guys are kind of widening that spectrum of storytelling in that way. What have been some favorite episodes that you've produced, like that you've just been like, oh, I got this, and like I nailed this one, this is my jam, where you're just like, you produce an episode and you're like, like I've done it. Because I think as podcasters, there's always those episodes where you feel extra proud of, or extra excited about, or that you want to share with people just a little bit more. What have been those episodes for the both of you?
So I can think of two off the top of my head, and I love all my children.
Yeah.
To be clear. But yeah, I'll pick a slightly older one and a more recent one. So we did one on languages, and we were focusing on how French and English are being given a lot of prominence in schools and in homes, and how that's leading to the erosion of, this generation of kids growing up who can't speak the mother tongue. They can't speak Shona, Ndebele, Zulu, whatever it is,
Their
or
traditional
the struggle
languages.
to exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we spoke to three people. There was a girl from South Africa, Khaliso, who is 17 and just like incredible. And she, had grown up speaking Xhosa and Zulu, and then she'd moved to a school which was predominantly a private school, and her English wasn't very good. And she was just talking about, in order to fit in, how she kind of essentially just completely kind of stopped speaking any of the languages that she'd grown up speaking, just so she could learn English and she could fit in, because she was really bullied around not being able to speak English. And, even though she's only 17, and then kind of during this kind of turn of kind of realizing what was lost when she was, unable to speak these languages. And then we spoke to a girl in Nigeria, and she was talking about how her parents had always prized English because, in terms of wanting, and I fully understand it. It's about kind of wanting your kids to do well, kind of setting them up and saying English is sort of the kind of the language of trade, of different things, and so you want to set them up. And her parents had always said you can only speak English even though they're Igbo, so they'd speak Igbo to each other but never to the kids. But they were very strict about it being English only. And because of some complicated family dynamics, she ended up meeting her grandmother a little bit later in life, and she couldn't communicate with her grandmother. Her parents had to translate, because her grandmother didn't obviously speak English, and for her it was just this moment of realizing that this is not, this isn't great. So she's now on a journey to relearn, to learn, I guess, not relearn. And then there was a guy from Ghana who's a teacher, and he was talking about how, in the rural area, because initially I thought this sounded like just a middle class problem, but it's actually not. In the rural areas, he's saying that all these kids whose the parents just want them to speak English, but they don't. Sometimes they're not there, not up to scratch yet, so they'll struggle in school and they'll eventually just fall out because they haven't, they're being forced to learn in a language that they don't fully grasp. And it was just one of those episodes when you go through, you kind of, it was very insightful, and we got a lot of feedback around it, because I think it's a very kind of topical conversation. It's something I think a lot of people are reckoning with. So that was one. It's called Losing My Language. And then we did another one that Mary produced this, Mary, my ace producer, and she did, it was called Missing. And it was basically about, Without a Trace, sorry, was that what it ended up being called, Without a Trace. And it's about a guy called Kenny Chikonka in Zambia who just went missing. He was meant to go to Zimbabwe with his brother, but then for one reason or another, he ended up staying with his cousin, and he just disappeared. And it's about like the fallout, how the family has dealt with, just imagine your brother or your son just kind of disappearing and no one has any answers. And, the police haven't been as helpful as, they would have liked. And it's just been, how that's affected the family. And I just found it incredibly moving. I have brothers, and I just the thought of it, and I spoke to the father and I spoke to the sister, and just those interviews stayed with me, because it was something I just felt very deeply, just hearing them, and just hearing the incredible kind of sadness and grief that comes without closure has to be kind of an impossible grief, right? And so those two episodes, I think, yeah. But like I said, I love all my babies.
No, I've definitely heard both of those episodes. And Namulanta, earlier, sorry, we're talking about the episode that has recently come out, Birds and the Bees. I think that's what that's called as well, for those of you who are watching and want to check it out. It's called The Birds and the Bees, or Birds and the Bees?
Birds and the Bees, yeah.
Yeah. So Namulanta, what has been kind of an episode that really lights you up and has been an exciting moment for you?
Yeah, for me, I think it was earlier on, and I think I mentioned that empathy has been my pet word. I'm really trying to embrace it for the past, since my daughter was born, so the past almost 6 years. And for me, this episode, it's called Self-Defense Guy. It was the display of empathy for me, because he's a Dutch guy living in America, and he military background. And what he does is he does self-defense videos for women online. which is a great thing.
Yeah.
But what he does is he really puts himself in the shoes of a woman. So he would go into the nail salon and get acrylic nails, like long painted acrylic nails. He'll get a full set and pay full price for them. And then he would show you how to get out of a jam or get out of a situation with these nails on, you know. And for me, it was just going the extra mile and saying, okay, yes, I do these videos to help women get out of situations where they can defend themselves. But he took it a step further and thought, okay, what are the impediments? What are the things that a woman is actually got on or going through at the time to realize for him to make videos that are really, really specific to a woman. And the fact that, you know, he struggled and he tied himself up and he was trying to take them off, and I can't even imagine how long he'd practiced for before the actual video came out with him succeeding, you know. So I just love the effort that he was putting in and the empathy that he was showing in wanting to do what he does, but make it really possible for a woman to understand what he's saying and to understand what he's saying. And for me, that was just the epitome of empathy. And as I say, I love all my babies, as Kim says. But for me, that one really shows. It really shows how you know, just going that extra mile can really help someone, and you might not even know it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's so much fun, I think, as creators, because, you know, it's true. We love all the episodes that we create. And then there are those episodes that just, they stand out in some way, you know, whether it's our connection to the subject or the way that they go about it, or kind of the narrative and the full circle aspect of the story. It's so interesting as podcasters and as auditory storytellers. I think it's something that you know, there are those episodes and those moments, I think, that really do stand out. So it's always great to hear from creators. What are your favorites? But no, we love all of them. Which ones stood out, I guess? Yeah. So what podcasts are the two of you fans of? What podcasts do you love to listen to? I think everybody out there is always looking for recommendations. But as creators, you know, I think, you know, some podcasts have their own fandoms in some ways. So, Kim, what do you listen to in terms of podcasting? And
I listen to a lot. I listen to a lot.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
My phone. I'm just going to pull up my phone actually just to see what I'm currently listening to. I think that will make it easier and quicker. So I've just finished the Trojan Horse Affair. I don't know if you guys listened to that. I thought that was excellent, and now I'm reading all the critique around it, as often happens when something is been such a big moment. But I absolutely love The Daily. I love Reveal, which is an investigative podcast. I love Reveal. I love Who Weekly, which is just a pop culture, just is very, very, like, when I'm given the state of the world, you just need something light and breezy about, like, non-celebrities. It's a weird podcast about non-celebrities called Who Weekly, which I love. There's one called The Read, which again is about, you know, pop culture. The Read is great. I'm loving The Experiment. I don't know if you guys listen to The Experiment. It's from Atlantic magazine, but they are doing some spectacular work just in terms of just incredible storytelling. So it's sort of based on kind of some of the articles that are written in the Atlantic magazine, but it's very good. I was listening to The Coming Storm, which is a BBC one. Basically, which is about politics in the States. I mean, oh gosh, there's so many. Reply All, Legally Clueless, Love and Radio. Oh yeah, I love all of them. Like, I got so many, and I'm always listening. Rough Translation. Rough Translation. I don't know if you guys listen to Rough Translation. I also really like that. I always have many on the go, and it's great because every day a new one's coming out. So those are kind of a short list, but I have a very long list. You can get in touch if you want a full list.
That's great.
I'm like you. I have a lot that I'm listening to. I don't know if when you first started podcasting, if you would listen to like all of them, and now I have to like retrain myself how to listen to a podcast, because now I'm just like, oh yeah, there was an edit here, and you know, I'm trying to, and so I've been listening to that, and I'm learning from them all. But the ones I'm listening to the Kombo, and I'm listening to Jeans and Jollof as well, which is an American one.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
so I've just started listening to that quite a bit, which I'm enjoying, just discussion about,
yes.
all sorts of things, but there's a very
Mhm.
African centered. I'm also listening to one called it's a Kenyan one called It's Related, I Promise,
Yeah,
which
Sharon
again,
Bashira. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So those are the two I'm really listening, and the Comb, of course, which I've been listening to since we began. But those are the two I'm listening to at the moment. I'm not able to listen to lots of
It's
podcasts at
lots.
the same time. Yeah, so
What are
it's
you?
kind of like a
Can I
book for
ask?
me.
Namulanta, what are you looking for when you're listening? Like, what is it that you're like it's related, I promise. Like, what is it that you seek when you're looking for a podcast to
What
listen
draws
to?
you in? Yeah.
Mm, mm.
I like stories. I like human stories, and I
Yes,
like
yes.
yeah, I like I like listening to that. Someone telling their story, or the
Yeah.
producers, the presenters discussing a topic, and
Mhm,
I like hearing about what the way other people think about something, and um, I really like learning something new as well.
mhm. That
So
makes sense.
in those, I'm getting I'm getting it all mixed up into one. But yeah, like I said, I listen to them one at a time for sure. It's like reading a book for me. I don't know if it's something like my podcast palette isn't very advanced yet, but I can't listen to too many at the same time. So I
Well,
tend to listen to a couple.
see, for me, what's happened is like books have sort of, and I've vowed that 2022 I'll remedy this. I'm reading less books and listening to more podcasts. But I think I really
Mm,
need to. Yeah, it's just happened because my commute to I used to read on my
mhm.
commute, but now it's just become. I'm just like, oh, I can never get a seat. I'm on the train and my hands, so
Yeah.
now it's just better for me to listen. I don't like audiobooks. I just prefer
Mm,
to have a physical book. So
yeah.
it seems like podcasts have sort of edged books out, but I'm determined to kind of half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're both absolutely right there. And it's so interesting. A lot of my friends, Kim, have actually said that they've stopped reading because they listen to so many more podcasts.
Yeah.
Mm,
And so I
I don't know
just
if it's a good
wonder how
thing.
that changes like our patterns
Mm.
I think some people also are more auditory learners. So there's
Mm.
actually that element as well. Like, do you retain more auditorily apart from like not getting a seat on the train and the fumbling of the book? Because I've been there. We've all been there. But I think in terms of retention and also, when you're listening to a podcast, like the tonality and the emotion that
mhm.
comes through
Mhm.
in people's voices is so much more powerful sometimes than if you read something. You don't always hear it in your head that way.
Mhm.
So I think it's such an interesting aspect. And Kim, I also wanted to ask you, as a journalist with so much that goes on in the world, you
Mm.
know, it sounds like you also are like listening to and I don't want to say exposed to, but you listen to or you're around a lot of news.
Mhm.
And I think news overwhelm or just the amount of, you know, hearing what's going on in the world all the time can be um, a lot.
Mhm.
Can be overwhelming or can feel heavy. What do you do to shift that or kind of break it up or balance that?
Yeah. No, this is one of those things I've been kind of grappling with for quite some time
Yeah.
now. And I think one of the answers was what I just showed you there in my my
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
listening.
Who is it?
I've
Who
sort of
knows? Right.
yeah, I've just who weekly.
Who weekly?
I've
Okay.
yeah, there's been a kind of a shift in the content. Like I used to listen to a
Mm,
lot of politics podcasts, like just wall to wall politics. And
yeah.
I've seen that I've kind of started to reduce that because it became overwhelming because there was a lot happening. Seems to be just constantly things happening. There's just never, I know we always hark back to a golden era, but I do remember a time when there'll be a big news story and then there'll be a big lull between the news stories. But now it just seems to be like breaking news, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news, and I think it's been a lot. And so for me, it's about kind of pacing myself so that I'm not constantly drinking from a fire hose and just taking all this news that which I think does eventually kind of start to weigh you down. It really does. So being able to go into these sort of pop culture where people are just talking about films, and I listen to a lot of arts and culture related podcasts, that for me is a real center of pleasure. And inevitably politics sort of does bleed into it,
Mhm.
but it's not in that way that it's just you're talking about kind of hard news and geopolitics. So that's one way I do it. And I also try to kind of give myself kind of digital sabbaticals. There are days when I'm just kind of offline, and just to try give myself the space to just, I don't know, not do anything or hear or read anything that's, to just read. I would read, like, I love essays and stuff, and just about stuff that's not related to politics. But I've had to take a very deliberate kind of approach to that, because I think it was sort of 2020, end of 2020, and I realized that you can't just be in it the whole time. You can't be on the whole time. Otherwise, it does start to kind of grind you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that digital sabbatical. I think it's so apt, because there's just a sense of overwhelm for so many people, and especially, you've been in journalism for quite a long time and have an established career, and so it must be coming from. There's a lot of hand gestures, but it must be coming. It must feel like it's coming at you sometimes.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and Namulanta, I know quite a few people who have a very similar experience. You love podcasts, you kind of get obsessed, and you have all your favorites, and then you start creating a podcast, and you see how it's made, and you just you're like, oh, the sound design, or oh, that effect, or I made that cut on the thing, and it's something where you definitely get it back. And I think after a while, you do hit critical mass with your own show enough that you start to weave back other shows in. But I think it's really common, because so many podcasters get into podcasting because we love it, right? We love hearing the different narratives and stories and perspectives and shows. And then you create your own, and you're like, oh, this is a lot. I can't listen to anybody else.
It's ruined the magic for me. But I'm so glad to hear you say that. A lot of people that felt the same way.
I think it's a common experience. Absolutely. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and I have one last question. 2022 feels like things are kind of shifting, or there's in some places around the world, things are opening. What are some stories that you're excited to tell as we move into 2022?
I guess trying to kind of look at what, obviously the pandemic is still very much with us.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be like it's over.
No. What I mean is that, like, in terms of in terms of my answer, because we want to look at what's coming next, kind of, and even though it's still with us, is just sort of looking at how it's affected people's lives in the kind of long term. And for example, we're going to be coming to Nairobi. I'm going to see you then, Namulanta, I hope. And because one of the stories that we're working on is kind of families choosing, having kind of experienced life in the city, to leave. So you're having kind of urban-rural migration, because the story has always been on kind of rural-urban migration, but people having kind of been in during COVID realized that they need more space, or they want to just change the way they live their lives. And obviously remote working has made things easier. So that's one of the things we want to look at, kind of like the way the pandemic has shifted the way we live and how we want to live, and kind of that kind of reckoning we've had with the way we've been kind of living our lives. And obviously, unfortunately, Ukraine, when you look at what's happening, the war in Ukraine, I think I've been following the stories of the African angle, a lot of students who've been kind of caught up and caught up in the war, and I'm just trying to think long term what that would look like for them, kind of having been caught up. And we've been following some of the story. I've been in touch with some people who from the very beginning were trying to make their way out, and just trying to follow their stories and see what it looks like and where they're going to end up. So that's one, that unfortunately it's not the happiest story to tell, but I think it's a necessary one. So those are sort of the two things. Two things I can think of immediately.
No, those are both important. Namulanta.
So for me, we've just wrapped up 15, 16 episodes or so. So that's the first season. I don't know if I'm coming back for a second season. We'll have to wait and see. So keep your fingers crossed. If I did come back, I would like to see some more African stories, to be honest. I don't know, Kim. I don't know if it's a thing, but I find there's a lot of wariness in terms of sharing amongst the African community. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's something that I will continue to have to push for.
Mhm, mhm.
What's your experience been? Sorry to throw a question at
Yeah,
you.
no, not at all, not at all.
No, we want to hear it. Yeah.
Do you know what
Yeah.
it is, Namulanta? I think you're absolutely right. I think what I found really helps is getting people to getting kind of word of mouth recommendations. So it's a friend of a friend. So it's a friend of a friend. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so people will come to me. It's people who know people, like a network of people, as opposed to approaching people cold. Because I
Okay.
find the times when I approach someone cold and I'm like, hi, I came across this article where you were mentioned, or it's always so much more difficult versus, hi guys, do you know of anyone? And then some people are like, okay, I'll ask my network. And, so I tend to cultivate people via networks as opposed to, I do sometimes approach people cold, but that tends to be a higher bar.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like somebody who knows somebody who said, okay, you can speak to Kim. I know Kim, it's much more helpful. And it's not, you can't always do it that way. But
Yeah.
I found that way tends to work better for me. Because you're right, especially when it's personal stories. Like,
Yeah.
why would I tell you this personal
Yeah.
story when
Yeah.
it's in
Yeah. I don't even know you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even
Yeah.
know you. Why am I going to tell
Yeah.
you my life story? So if
Yeah.
it's possible, like, and I think you start to build it once you speak to someone, you try, where you can stay in contact and always be like, hey, I'm working on this other story. Would you know of anyone? And I find that really, really has been so helpful to us. And like I said, we're lucky we have this network of journalists at the BBC Africa, because then you can just be like, hi guys,
Yeah.
finally help me find somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's tricky. It's very
Yeah.
tricky.
So that would be great. That would be great for me. We've had quite a few start stops in terms of
Mhm,
just people do writing in cold, but
mhm.
then as the process goes on, they're like, oh no, I've had a change of heart. I don't think I want to, bare my soul on a podcast, which is
Mm.
fine. But I would
Mhm.
just really like if we did come back for season 2, which I really hope we do, that we'd have a few more
Fingers crossed.
African stories. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Sure. I'm sure the
Yeah, I
listener
think that
now.
vulnerability hangover is especially with the kind of stories that you tell. I could imagine,
Mm-hmm.
they're so personal and so
Yeah.
vulnerable. It's
Yeah.
really brave work that you do. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you.
oh, well,
So
thank
yeah,
you both.
that's really helpful. Thank you, Kim.
No,
It's like
thank you.
dating, I guess. So okay,
Exactly.
word of mouth. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like it's
Okay,
a relational thing. A lot of
Yeah.
absolutely.
places, I feel like it's always about community and who you know. And I think it's very strange, but and I mean, you guys are both with the BBC World Service, but I've found that podcasting in general is a medium that feels that way.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
a lot of podcasters to have guests on their show, it's a it really is podcasting really is communal in a lot of ways. So
Mm.
it's been really interesting, from an aggregate perspective to
Yeah.
witness that, because it seems like it's very insular. You have your show and you produce it and you put it out, and then it's out there for the world. But in a lot of ways, there is community involved in so many aspects of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I've been you know, I've realized things on the podcast as I'm speaking, realized things about myself or the way I think, or um, something about the way I've grown up, and you realize it as you're speaking to someone else. And sometimes it's been a shock for me. So even just trying to balance. Um,
I think we lost
I
Namulanta for
think
a
we lost
second.
Namulanta, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. Oh no, I see her. Hold on,
sorry,
Namulanta.
sorry, I don't know
Hello.
what
No,
happened.
no problem.
It was going so well. So yeah, so I was just saying, yeah. So for me, it's been, also for me as a presenter, trying to find that balance where I'm comfortable with exposing how I feel and my thoughts as well, and considering that I won a competition, so my family, my kids have never had exposure to this before, so I want to protect them as well. So it's been good,
Yeah,
just finding that
absolutely.
balance. Yeah.
It's yeah, and your show is beautiful, both of you. Thank you both so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to read our brief outro, and then we'll end it for today. So thank you everyone for joining us for this live stream, the Storytelling Podcast Week March Roundtable around the world with the BBC World Service, with special guests Namulanta Kombo of Dear Daughter and Kim Chakanetsa of the Comb. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Storytelling Podcast Week has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and storytellers from scripted fiction and nonfiction podcasts from across our world and our imaginations. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Storytelling Podcast Week podcast, so make sure to check that out. If you join late or want to have another listen to these amazing podcasters and storytellers, you can replay the live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel and the podcast for Storytelling Podcast Week. Storytelling Podcast Week is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 600,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for next month's live panel from Storytelling Podcast Week in April. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye.